I know this is going to sound super counterintuitive for a lot of you, but if you're looking to get warmer looking photos, pushing the white balance slider really hard is not gonna do you any favor. And I really mean it. If you're pushing the white balance too far as one of the first steps in your edit, you can render the HSL null because all the colors in your photo are gonna be living in the yellow channel, and that's not all. If you push the white balance too far, you can actually get the skin tones to look really sickly. So instead, let me show you a few better ways to add warmth to your photo that are still gonna maintain a clean look at the end of the day. But first of all, hi, my name is Vlad, I'm a portrait photographer and Lightroom nerd, and I spent the last few years of my life developing tools and presets for Lightroom so I can get cinematic looking portraits directly in the app without having to rely on any third-party plugins or other software. And today, I'm gonna talk about warming up photos, but if you think that any of the tools that I'm using during this video are useful and would fit in your workflow, maybe check out my website where I sell those tools and presets so I can keep doing these educational videos. And here in Lightroom, I have a portrait that I shot a few days ago with my new favorite lens, the Samyang 45mm. And as you can see, it's pretty blue. And I only done some minor adjustments to get this cinematic looking grade. My tones are pretty much in place. And I also didn't even bother to fix the white balance. And that's the first thing that we're gonna do now. I'm gonna put my vibrance and saturation to 100%. And I'm going to push my white balance just enough that the bright side of the building over here is gonna be warm, but the shadow side is gonna look colder, a bit bluish if you wish. So let's push the white balance until that happens, and we can see that right about the 7000 mark, it's starting to get magenta. So I'm gonna add a bit more green into the photo, but right now the shadow side is pretty neutral. The bright side is a bit too warm for my taste, so I'm gonna pull it down just a bit more. And I think this is a pretty correct white balance. And if I'm right, when I reset the vibrance and saturation, the photo should look super neutral. So let's do that. And as you can see, it looks almost black and white. And that's exactly what we want in the beginning of our edit, a pretty neutral white balance starting point so we can get our photos to look warmer with other tools. This way, when I go back in Lightroom, any slider in here in the HSL panel is gonna work properly, where if, for example, I would have a white balance that is set super warm, this slider wouldn't do much. So let's reset my white balance back to what we had before, and now let's start adding some warmth. And I'm gonna start by adding some saturation in the image, but instead of using the usual saturation slider, which might lead to oversaturated highlights, I'm gonna do a mask that's gonna be a luminance range mask, and I'm gonna click on a midtone, but I'm going to refine it over here so it targets mostly the midtones, but it fades down towards the edges of the spectrum, especially the highlights. This way, I can add a bit more saturation in my photo without making it look crunchy or oversaturated in the highlights. And while for now I only added saturation and not warmth to the photo, having this as a mask means that everything that we're gonna do in the usual adjustment panels is gonna be amplified by this saturation mask, so we can get more warmth out of the basic tools. Now, if you toggle the mask on and off, you can see that the photo got saturated, but none of my tones look unnatural. And that's really important because the goal today is to add warmth without washing up the entire image in orange tones. Now, another trick that I really like to use when wanting to warm up my photo is to add saturation in the red channel specifically. And as you can see, when I'm pumping up the saturation over here, the skin tones are starting to look a bit more orangey. It might not always lead to natural looking skin tones, but adding just a bit is gonna give the impression that the photo looks a bit warmer. And if my skin tones are getting a bit red, I also like to push my hue in the red primary to the right just a tiny bit. And if I toggle this off and on, you can see that the effect is minimal, but we're starting to get a bit warmer in this area over here. And we can also get a bit of warmth by pushing the saturation in the blue channel, but this is also going to increase the saturation in the blues in our photos, and this might lead to very strong color contrast. So I'm gonna avoid that for now. And if I take a new snapshot of what we have right now, I'm gonna call it basics and compare it to the point where I started this video, you can see that the photo already got a ton warmer. But this is just the beginning. A real trick is here in the HSL, where I'm going to go in and on every channel, I'm going to push the sliders to the left with around 20 points. A bit more in the orange and green and yellows, and a bit less in the blues over here. And as you can see, my photo got a lot orange in just a few clicks. So probably I pushed my orange too far, so I'm gonna knock it down just a few points and also push the red towards orange just a bit. And with just a few more clicks, I got from this greenish looking photo to these much warmer tones that look a bit more like a sunset. But that's not all. I can add a bit more saturation to my reds, oranges, yellows, and green tones, and this is gonna make the photo look a bit too warm. So I'm gonna counter that by adding a bit of luminance as well, because when you add saturation in these channels, you're also darkening the photo just a little bit. And now if I toggle off the adjustment, you can see how much warmer the photo looks, and here on his chest it even looks a bit brighter because of the adjustments that I made in the luminance panel. And now let's take one more snapshot. I'm gonna call this HSL, so we can compare this to what we had before and the starting point, which was super cold. And when I want to push the HSL a bit further, I can go back in here and also desaturate the aqua and the blue channel just a tiny bit so the orange stands out a bit more in the photo. But I have to be patient when I do this and make sure that I don't break any colors in the process, because if you want to go from orange to blues and you have a gradient in the photo, you might run into issues where you can create banding by pushing this too far apart. So try and keep your sliders in somewhat of a smooth line over here and don't push them too far. And that was about it with the tools that are manipulating the data that's already in the photo. Next up, I'm going to be shifting my attention to RGB curves and the color grading wheels. And I usually play with the RGB curves first because for RGB curves, I'm usually using my color response curves to emulate film. And you can see here that if I apply something like my Kodak Color 200 or my Fuji Superia preset in the push configuration, the photo gets a bit warmer. And of course, you can find those on my website. But the main idea is that if I add a bit of red in the highlights and turn it down in the midtones and shadows, and also do the same in the green channel with just a tiny bit of green and push down a point towards the shadows, so it's not all green, and do the opposite in the blue channel where I want a bit of warm, aka yellow, but I only want it in the highlights. I can get warmer looking photos by just playing around with the curves panel. And of course, you can get much better results than I did with 3 points if you take your time and place a lot more points in the RGB curve and get a warmer looking photos by using the curves. But since I don't want to waste your time, I'm just going to go ahead and apply my color response curve for Kodak Color 200. And if you want to grab those color response curves, you're going to find them on my website right there. And because you watched so far into the video, I'm going to leave you a link with a discount in the description down below right next to the like button. But the video is not done yet. I have one more trick, and that's the way I like to use the color grading wheels. And here, if I want to add warmth to my photo, I'm going to come into the global wheel and add something like hue 30 or 40 with a saturation of 10. This makes the entire photo just a bit warmer while also keeping it pretty clean. But if I want to take it a step further, I'm going to be adding yellow in my highlights, but again, keeping the saturation really low, and I'm going to be adding oranges in my midtones to get that nice transition from those yellows that I added before. And if I toggle off the color grading wheels, you can see now how much warmth I injected into the photo, while the highlights still look pretty clean and they don't get overly yellow. And while this might not look super good in this photo, you can take that even further by adding just a tiny bit of reds or even a bit of magenta. I'm at hue 352 right now in the shadows, but this already starts to look unnatural, so I'm going to be playing with the blending slider, and I can push it down to 20 or 30 and get a nice warm color grade without making my photo look super warm like it would look if I push the blending too far to the right. So let's reset it, and this is what I have right now. Let's toggle the color grading wheels off and see how much colder the photo was and how far I pushed it right now. But honestly, I think that I slightly overdid it for this photo because I combined all the ways that I know to add a bit of warmth to the photo without messing up the white balance. But you don't have to use all of them on a single photo in your workflow, and just adapt the ones that fit your style better. Once again, this is how the photo looks now, and this is how it looked when I started working on it today. Let's also do a small recap. The first things that I did was this luminance mask that added saturation, but it excluded the highlights in the photo. And I also played with the calibration panel, pushing the saturation in the red primary channel a bit more to the right. Then I played with the HSL, and in here I pushed the orange, yellow, greens and aqua tones to the left with around 20 points, added a bit more saturation in those same channel and a bit of luminance to balance that out. Then I played with the curves, where I actually used one of my color response curves that are a way to emulate film, and then to top everything off I also used the color wheels to add a bit more warm across the photo, but instead of adding the same tone over the entire photo, I added reds in the shadows, oranges in the midtones, and yellows in the highlights to get a nice range of colors across my photo. I really hope that you enjoyed this video and that you learned something new. And if you did, make sure to hit the like button before going to the next video. And if you want to learn some more Lightroom tricks, YouTube thinks that this video right here would be a perfect match for you. Anyway, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!